Now, our speaker tonight, Dr. Bilal Phillips, is also very internet savvy, and so I invite you to visit his websites, www.islamiconlineuniversity.com, where you can enroll for courses on Islam, listen to audios, watch certain class videos, and also download PDFs. That's at beginning again, www.islamiconlineuniversity.com. That's islamiconlineuniversity.com, or www.islamicstudiesacademy.com. www.islamicstudiesacademy.com. These are two websites of our speaker, Dr. Bilal Phillips. Inshallah, looks like we're getting ready, inshallah. Once I get the final nod, I will begin with the introduction speech for Dr. Bilal Phillips, and we'll begin. We'll be moving over to the second podium, inshallah. This is the podium of Dr. Bilal. We'll mic, inshallah. I apologize, inshallah, for the slight delay, inshallah. At now, inshallah, it is my pleasure to introduce and bring to the podium our final speaker for this evening, Saturday, the 19th of January 2008, the Chennai, India Peace Vision of Islam Conference, Dr. Abu Amina Bilal Phillips. Dr. Abu Amina Bilal Phillips was born in Jamaica, West Indies, and grew up in Canada, where he accepted Islam in 1972. He completed a BA from the College of Islamic Disciplines, Usuluddin, at the Islamic University in Medina, Saudi Arabia in 1979, and then Masters in Islamic Theology in 1985 at the University of Riyadh College of Education. In 1994, he completed a PhD in Islamic Theology in the Department of Islamic Studies at the University of Wales in the United Kingdom. From 1994 to 2001, Dr. Bilal had founded and directed the Islamic Information Center in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and the Foreign Literature Department of Dar al-Fatah Islamic Press in Sharjah. In the year 2001, he went on to establish the Islamic Online University, the first accredited Islamic university on the internet. He was a professor of Arabic and Islamic studies at the American University in Dubai and Ajman universities. He was the head of the Department of Arabic and Islamic Studies at Preston University in Ajman, United Arab Emirates, a lecturer and head of the Sharia Advisory Committee at the Qatar Guest Center in Doha, Qatar, and he is currently the Dean of the Islamic Studies Academy in Doha, Qatar. You can seek more information on this at www.islamicstudiesacademy.com, Islam spelled with a double A. For more information about him and his activities, you may visit his personal website at www.bilalphillips.com, BILALPHILIPS. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking on the topic, Islam and Modernism, welcome to the podium, Sheikh Dr. Abu Amina Bilal Phillips. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sheikh.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين واشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah, and success will ultimately be given to those who are righteous. And enmity should be towards those who are oppressors in this world. And I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship but Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the last messenger of Allah. Modernism is a topic and a term which comes from another civilization. It is something which has no place in Islamic teachings. It is a foreign term, a term which is being promoted in order to change Islam as we know it today, or as it has been known for the last 1,400 years. Efforts to modernize Islam began some time ago. But before looking at those efforts, it is important for us to understand the roots of modernism in its original home. In Europe, in America, when scientists found contradictions between the writings of the Bible, the Torah, and what they had learned and developed from their own empirical research, a movement, a rebellion against what could be called Orthodox Christianity and Judaism began. A science known as higher criticism, where biblical texts were compared, ancient texts with more recent texts, to determine where changes had taken place, and ultimately leading the scholars to conclude that these works were the works of men. Though in previous times the Bible was considered to be the Word of God, and the Torah, the Word of God to Moses. However, from the period of the Renaissance up to the 20th century, a progressive change took place, which led even scholars of the Bible and the Torah to conclude that these were the works of human beings. Therefore, as works of human beings, they had to be updated. Human efforts are not complete, cannot be complete, because times change, and therefore religion written up by human beings also needed to change along with the times. This way of thinking led to the modernist movement among Christians and Jews. It took on a variety of different names, among them liberal interpretations and others. And what we found was that changes took place within the church and within Jewish tradition, basically trying to modernize Christianity and Judaism so that it would become acceptable to a new generation that was raised on science and inquiry and challenging and questioning every known truth. As a result, it was concluded, the mic. As a result, it was concluded that anything which went against scientific knowledge had to be reinterpreted. The texts were reinterpreted from a devotional perspective, from a moral and ethical perspective, and the laws were left behind. So we had Jews who didn't abide by the dietary laws, how animals were to be slaughtered, which animals could be eaten, etc. Modern Judaism rejected these laws as being antiquated, and modern Christianity followed with regards to the laws or principles that the church followed into the 21st century, where the society changed in its attitudes towards things like pornography, homosexuality, etc. So the church changed its views also. So now we have in Protestantism homosexual priests. Homosexual priests, something unthinkable in the 60s and before. But now In spite of the texts about Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible, we now have homosexual priests. This attitude, people have tried also to put on Islam. And the movement to do it began from the colonial era, when the colonial powers conquered the Muslim world and imposed their way of life on the Muslim world. We found Muslims in a state of retreat, stagnation from an educational point of view, falling more and more into a state of backwardness, as the colonial powers would promote others in those countries, Muslim countries, who are non-Muslims, etc., promote them into positions of authority. And the consequence of that led to three distinct trends amongst Muslims. Muslims who might be called scholars and others. On one hand, we had a group who were traditionalists. Traditionalists in the sense that they felt we should just continue as we were. Our tradition was madrasas. We leave the reading and understanding of Quran to the ulama, and the average Muslim didn't know Arabic, wasn't encouraged to learn Arabic in the non-Arabic countries, and the traditionalists supported that way. There was another group that arose at this time who, looking at the situation, realized that Muslims had strayed from the path. And this is what led to their state of backwardness and decline. Not Islam. It wasn't Islam. Islam was intact. But Muslims had strayed away from Islam. So what needed to be developed, what needed to be promoted, was a return to the original teachings of Islam as found in the Quran and the Sunnah. The third group which appeared was that of the modernists. Those who felt that Islam was outdated and it was necessary actually to change Islamic teachings themselves. And it is this group that the colonial powers supported strongly. So we find appearing as representatives of this group in the three major centers of Islam: Turkey, Egypt, and India. Turkey, where the seat of the caliphate, the Islamic caliphate was, it was necessary to undermine that and to bring it down. And the person chosen for that job was Kemal Ataturk. Kemal Ataturk, whose ideas were secular. He attempted to change the face of Islam in Turkey and from there project a new face over the rest of the Muslim world. He called for the adhan to be given in Turkish. He brought pews into the masjids, chairs that people should sit on, like the chairs in the churches. He forbade Muslims from wearing turbans. They had to wear bowler hats, like the people in Europe wore at that time. And he also forbade women from wearing hijab, from covering their heads, the headscarf was prohibited. In Egypt, the leader of that movement was Muhammad Abdu, who was chosen and given the position of Shaykh al-Azhar, the head of Azhar. Azhar, Egypt was chosen because Azhar University was considered the seat of Islamic learning in the Muslim world. This is where Muslim scholarship was traditionally and had been traditionally developed. So that became a focus. Muhammad Abdu, his position, as he said, whenever he felt distress or he felt a need for renewal of his spirit, when he felt down, etc., there in Egypt, he would travel to Europe and revive his spirit. So he is telling us with that expression what his point of view was. Basically, that what the West had, the Muslim world needed. That the Western world was completely compatible with Islamic teachings, etc. Muslims needed to be like Westerners. And he attempted, because of the influence of science, he was very much overwhelmed by Western science. He attempted to explain away all of the miracles in the Quran through other means. For example, in the chapter known as Surah Al-Fil, where Allah describes the destruction of the armies of Abraham, when he came with an elephant to destroy the Kaaba in Mecca, that Allah sent birds with clay pebbles in their beaks and they dropped it on these people and it killed them and killed the elephant. This was a miracle. Muhammad Abdu, in an attempt to make it acceptable to a Western mind, scientific mind, said, well, actually, the birds were not really birds. The word for bird, tayr, really means a flying being. It could be an insect or a bird, or even a flying fox. They have flying foxes, and it's a kind of animal. It's all called tayr. So he said, really, tayr referred to mosquitoes. That's what was happening. Mosquitoes who were carrying microbes. Right? The clay pebbles were not really clay pebbles, they were microbes. And when they bit the army of Abraha and his elephant, they were infected by disease and they died. That was his explanation. In India, we had the representative of modernism, Sir Syed Ahmed Khan, the founder of Aligarh University, who basically promoted the idea that success lied in following the British way. He promoted rationalism, and he also denied the miracles in the Quran. He spoke against polygamy, the Islamic divorce laws, against riba, saying it was okay, interest, modern interest, against the hudud, the fixed Islamic laws for certain crimes. And, of course, in Aligarh University, what was taught there of Islam was taught only in English, to take the students away from the Arabic foundations, to create a new generation who would be divorced from the roots of Islamic knowledge. His student, Amir Ali, was an extreme modernist who wrote a book called The Spirit of Islam, one of the first books that I read when I accepted Islam. He mentioned in there that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wrote the Quran. And he promoted the idea that it is about the spirit of Islam and not the letter of the law. We focus or should focus only on the devotional aspects of Islam. This is where the truth of Islam lies, not in the laws, because times change. And to try to apply laws from 1,400 years ago is illogical. In more recent times, we had what is known as the RAND Corporation report. It came out a few years back. And in it categorized Muslims into different categories. And it promoted those who it considered to be the modernist, or what they call them, the moderate Muslims. That was the other title. Moderate Muslims are the equivalent of the modern Muslims. These are Muslims who don't mind drinking alcohol, shaking the hands of women, praying once a week, and so on and so forth, not feeling that they have to observe the laws of Islam. They will explain that Islam is in the heart. It's a thing of the heart. It is not necessary to wear Islam as a badge externally. And in general, we can summarize that ancient approach as reason over revelation. Reason over revelation. Al-aql ala al-naql. The mind given precedence over what has been revealed. Reason and rationality. We should approach things from a reasoned and rational way and not according to revelation. This was expressed a long time before. From a few hundred years after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, a movement arose which was called the Mu'tazilites, Al-Mu'tazila, and they promoted the same idea, reason over revelation. And as a result, they created turmoil in the Muslim world. However, the Muslim world recovered and brushed them aside. In our times, from the 20th century, it is coming back at us again. And people are calling to reanalysis of Islam. It is not good for our times. We need to reassess. We need to revive, to change, in order to be able to survive in the 21st century and beyond. The idea idea of change, changing with the times, may sound very attractive. However, the fact of the matter is that if Islam was really from Allah, from God, then it should be good for all times. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on one occasion, when he sat with his companions, he drew a line in the sand, and then he drew lines on either side, branching off. And he explained to the people, to his companions, that the line in the middle was his path, the path to God. And the lines branching off on either side were paths of deviation, misguidance, with a devil at the end of each one calling people to it. And then he recited a verse from the Quran, وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِي مُسْتَقِيمًا فَاتَّبِعُوهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا السُّبُلَ فَتَفَرَّقَ بِكُمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ. This is my straight path. So follow it, and do not follow the many other paths, and in that way deviate. These paths will deviate, take you from that path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The path of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is one path. It is a path which is good for not only his time, but for all times. It was a path which has its roots in the Quran, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which was based on human nature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Almighty, who knew what would happen in human society, what changes would take place. He knew the needs of that society, and He prescribed laws which would guide them until the last day, because He sent His last messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Therefore, the message was the last message, and that last message was to be a source of guidance for humankind until the last day of this world. Therefore, the issue of modernism, which basically calls Muslims today to not be precise and concerned about the legal aspects of Islam, but to focus more on the devotional aspects, the spirit of Islam, not the letter. This movement focuses currently on female issues, the oppressed Muslim woman. She needs to be brought into the 21st century. Statistics which were mentioned to me today by a non-Muslim, that the most uneducated segment of society here in India is Muslim women. Most uneducated. So what does that mean? Does that mean that Islam is antiquated? It is outdated? It cannot provide a drive and a force and a means for women to be educated like men? What does it mean? Well, I answered that lady's question when she asked, with the fact that seeking knowledge is compulsory on every Muslim, as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said. No distinction between male and female, it is compulsory on both. Furthermore, the first generation of Muslims who conveyed Islam to us in its entirety, the superstructure of Islam, built on the infrastructure of the Quran. The fourth most prolific narrator of this structure of Islam from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the Prophet's wife, Aisha. She was the fourth most prolific narrator of hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ. And a generation of scholars studied under her. So, were it that Islam discouraged learning for women, then the Prophet's wife, Aisha, would not have been among the leading scholars of that generation. So really, Islam does not discourage women from education. In fact, it encourages education among women. However, it is within certain bounds, certain principles, that Islam does look at the role of the woman in the family and consider it to be primary. This is priority, that she look after the family. To be educated and look after the family, that is ideal, that is best. However, as I pointed out to the lady, when people talk about the statistics of the uneducated Muslim woman in India, I suggested to her that we should also look at the other set of statistics about the number of aborted females in India. The children whose lives are taken while they're in the womb. Where is this? Is this amongst the Muslims? No. The highest percentages are among other than Muslims. The right to life, which Islam enshrines, forbids the taking of the life of the fetus. So, not to say that there are not some Muslims who are disobedient and get involved in this practice also. Yes, there are Muslims who are involved in it too, but not on the scale as the non-Muslims. Because Islam teaches that the right to life is primary. Taking that child's life is prohibited. So if I had to choose, as I said to her, between an ignorant Muslim woman who protects the life of her child and an educated non-Muslim woman who will destroy her child, I will say I will choose that uneducated Muslim woman. So the Muslim woman who comes under attack, on one hand, we have to admit that Muslim men have been delinquent in their fulfilling their responsibility to educate their women. There is delinquency here. Muslims have not fulfilled their Islamic obligation of educating the women amongst them. There is failure. Failure not in Islam, but on the part of Muslims. So what needs to be done here is not modify the teachings of Islam, but wake up Muslims to the responsibility of educating their women. So we don't need to modernize. Because Islam never encouraged the ignorance of women. It encouraged their education. Also, with regards to women and their education, as I said, Islam goes a step further, and it stresses that women who are seeking education should do so in fields which are beneficial to the community, not just education for the sake of education, which will put them in situations which are un-Islamic, but education for the benefit of the community. So it has an outlook. It does focus on the need of the community. It does address the need, for example, to have Muslim female doctors and dentists who would serve the needs of the females. The other society doesn't care. Male, female, anything goes. He's a doctor, you can go to him. Well, that doctor is a man. Regardless of the oath that he swore and everything else, he's still a man. And as a man, if women are taking off their clothes in front of him, he is going to be affected. And as such, the numbers of cases of women who are abused, who are molested by doctors, is many. There are many cases of it happening. Maybe it's kept quiet to some degree. People are ashamed. But it is happening on a big scale. In America, people are not ashamed. They will speak out against it. So there are many, many, many cases on record. Doctors jailed for molestation of their patients. Many cases. So Islam says protect the women by educating women to be doctors and dentists so they can serve the need that women have and protect them from harm and protect their faith and protect their religion. And the attacks on Muslim women don't end there. There are attacks concerning divorce laws, concerning inheritance laws, marriage laws, dress, etc. There are many. For the most part, either what is being called for addresses a failure amongst Muslims, where Muslims may be involved, as our brother mentioned, in the evil practice of taking mahar from the women, the family of the women. An evil practice and a custom which comes from another tradition and which leads to the death of thousands of women in this country every year. They call them bride burnings, where that woman's family is not able to provide the money which was promised, or they want more and they can't provide more, so the husband, the young man, and his mother catch the bride in the kitchen, pour kerosene over her, and set her on fire. Thousands of cases of this every year. In order to try to deal with it, the government has banned this mahar business. And some women have reported men who tried to demand mahar. Few. But Islam had the solution right from the beginning. The mahar was to be given by the man to the woman, not even to her family, to the woman, symbolic of his preparedness to look after her. This is the correct way. We apply that and the problem is solved. Nothing new. It is the other society which had to introduce new laws to stop it. Islam already had the laws 1,400 years ago. If we leave the realm of the women and modernism, the other area of attack is from the field of science. Of course, the attack here is weak. It doesn't have the kind of strength that scientists had, secularists had with regards to the Bible and the Torah. Because there are many, many contradictions in the Bible and the Torah when it was placed in front of the scientific facts. In fact, in the Quran, what we find is that scientifically, what is mentioned in relationship to science is consistent with scientific facts. There is a portion of things which are mentioned. There's a portion of things mentioned which science doesn't know about. It doesn't say exists or doesn't exist. It doesn't know about it. It doesn't say it is wrong. It can't, because it doesn't have knowledge of it. But what it has knowledge of, what Islam speaks about in the Quran, is consistent with modern science. So what the modernists do is that they leave the Quran and they go then to what? To the Sunnah. The Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they try to attack that. And they take out, for example, the hadith of the fly. This is one of the popular hadiths which modernists like to use to discredit hadith literature, which is the explanation of the Quran. They take out the hadith of the fly. What does the hadith of the fly say? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, if a fly falls in your drink, dunk him in, push him in under the water, or the milk or whatever, and throw him out, and finish your drink. Because under one wing of the fly is disease, and under the other wing is the cure. So they say, doctors, Maurice Bucaille wrote about this in the back of his book, The Quran, the Bible, and Science. Doctors only know from the fly disease. The fly flies on diseased things and it brings those diseases to people. Flies are known for disease, so we don't know of any cure, so this hadith cannot be acceptable, cannot be authentic. Even though it is found in the most authentic books, we reject it. Because it contradicts, as they say, science. But really, does it contradict science? No, it doesn't. The hadith of the fly does not contradict science, really. It speaks about something which science doesn't know. That's all it's doing. Science knows about the disease, right? And the Prophet ﷺ 1,400 years ago pointed out, this is another point of the hadith that people don't reflect on. People 1,000 years ago, 1,400 years ago, didn't know that there was disease coming from the fly. The Prophet pointed it out 1,400 years ago, that it is a carrier of disease. But he also pointed out that it is a carrier of the cure. Science confirmed after the development of the microscope, where they could see microbes and the diseases which the fly carries, they said, yes, the fly carries disease. That's 16th century. 16th century. 1,000 years after the time that the Prophet ﷺ said that there was disease in the fly. Since then, They didn't investigate to see if there could be a cure from the fly also. It's just assumed it's just a source of disease, and that's it. Finish. End of story. However, if we were to have said to somebody in the 1900s, we said to them that in snake poison, the poison of the cobra, there is medicine for heart disease. What do you think they would have said then? Well, sounds reasonable. They would say, you're mad. You're insane. It is known that if a cobra bites you, the poison will stop your heart and you will die. Yet today, there are cobra farms. Bangladesh is well known for it. Cobra farms where the poison of the cobra is milked from the cobra and extracted from it is medicine used for heart patients. That is the fact of science. The snake has in his own body the poison which could kill him along with the antidote. If he didn't have the antidote, every time he bit something he would kill himself. So he has the antidote within him. And there are many other plants in the kingdom, it is known, that have both disease and cure. So it is not something unusual. It exists in the world of science. The disease and the cure in the same animal or insect, etc. So the fact that science hasn't discovered it in the fly doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means they haven't discovered it. That's all. So we have that on one hand. Look on the other hand. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam 1,400 years ago told his companions, his followers, not to sleep on their stomachs. He told them, don't sleep on your stomachs. And to discourage them further, he said, that is the way the people of the hellfire lie, in the hell. But he told them, don't sleep on your stomach. When he found them, his companions sleeping on his stomach, he would come, nudge them with his foot, told them, don't sleep on your stomach. That was the instructions which he gave. For 1,400 years, devout Muslims followed that. They slept on the right side, as the Prophet did, or on their backs. They avoided sleeping on their stomachs. In the 20th century, in the late 70s, early 80s, doctors analyzing the problems of the back, the spine, leading to what they call sway back, people who are hunched over, who can't stand straight, various operations that they have to do to fix the spine. After analyzing those in an issue of Time magazine, they placed a series of recommendations. On the top of the list of recommendations, they said, don't sleep on your stomach. Don't sleep on your stomach. They explain that the spine is the heaviest, bone structure of the body. There is nothing to support it. It's only soft organs in front of it, so it will sag downwards if you lie on your stomach. They said, lie on your side or on your back. That was told 1,400 years ago. Furthermore, in the late 80s, around 1989, British medical scientists doing a survey on children who died in their sleep, babies 1-year-old, 2 years old, 8 months old. Parents put them to sleep and they die. They don't wake up. This is called cot death, or SDS, sudden death syndrome. There are different names for it. They didn't know what caused it. Speculation, but nobody knew. Scientists in the UK, they gathered data from the families who had a child die amongst them, asking them about the type of mattress that they put the child to sleep on, the type of crib, paint which was used, the atmosphere, what was the temperature in the room, were people smoking in the room. They tried to gather as much data about each of those children. Then they fed it into a computer and allowed the computer to correlate it and to bring out the common factors. Number one factor, children put to sleep on their stomachs. It was commonly known amongst the nurses that they would tell parents, tell the mother, if the child has colic, it's crying, it has upset stomach, put them to sleep, put them to lie on their stomachs. That was common knowledge. People used to do that. However, when the doctors realized this, they put on the front pages of the newspapers in the UK, a warning to parents not to put their children to sleep on their stomachs. Their babies, don't put them to sleep on their stomachs. They instructed the hospitals across the country to advise parents not to do this. 9 years later, in 1998, when they did an analysis of the rate of cot death, they found that it had dropped almost 70%. Their research was passed on to other parts of the world, in the US, etc., and it spread. But here was something. One might have said it is enough to know that it causes back problems, but here was something else, that it can lead to the death of children. This is something the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, spoke about 1,400 years ago. So do we need to modernize Islam? No, we don't. We may need to modernize Muslims in the sense that they need to educate themselves. They need to get involved in society, building institutions, etc. They need to go back to Islam and to practice it as it should be practiced. Yes. But modernize Islam? No. The teachings of Islam stand. No matter how the West may paint them, like the cutting off the hand of the thief. There is a website on the internet. When you go into it, it shows you a picture of the hand, 3D. And it talks about the miracle of the hand. How, the muscles, the ligaments, the bones work and show this beautiful, wonderful creation of God, the hand. Then at the end of it, it says, and Muslims cut it off. And Muslims cut it off. Well, if we go into the societies where Muslims cut the hand of the thief, what we find is a society which is secure. In Saudi Arabia, and I lived there for 20 years. I lived in Riyadh for 14 years in different parts of the city. And I can honestly say that for those 14 years, I never locked my front door. Closed it, but latching and locks and chains, never did it. And nobody entered my home, nor my neighbor's home. And when I spoke to many non-Muslims who lived there, and I asked them, how did they find life? You shouldn't be looking at, pluck it out. Remove it. Protect the society. And it should be known anyway that when the law for cutting the hand is applied, it's not applied to each and every person anyhow. There are rules. For example, the rules include that a person not steal any time property. There is mass property library and you steal a library book, your hand will not be cut off because you have a part of it. If you steal from something which is not in its normal place, meaning it has fallen from somebody's pocket, for example, and you pick it up, finders keepers, you're not supposed to do that. You may be punished for it, but they won't cut your hand off. Temptation is there. Whose hand is cut off? It is the professional thief, the pickpocket. How do you think somebody learns to pick a pocket? You think anybody can just go and pick a pocket? No. You have to train for it. How to distract the person? Partner who will bounce the person from the other side whilst the person is turning, your hand goes in his pocket. may use these terms, but we really don't have to. Just modernism, trend which challenges Islam right now and Muslims. It is a part of the globalization of Western culture. To get a form of and succeed in globalizing its values, it is promoted that is there, that country, those countries of the West have gone down morally. Corruption is rampant. Families are falling apart. This is the consequence when people stray away from the laws of God and put it all in the hands of men. Then our foundation for society becomes lost. Islam stands as it was 1,400 years ago, not in need of any modernization, but only in need of implementation. This is the challenge before us today, my brothers and sisters. To implement Islam, to make Islam real, to show what Islam has to offer in India, in the world. We have a beautiful way of life. We have the ultimate way to establish peace in society. We have it, but we're not utilizing it. We're not practicing it. So instead, we're looked at as terrorists, we're looked at as backward, as oppressors of women, etc., etc., etc. This is all a consequence of our deviation from Islam. And our success ultimately lies with returning to the teachings of Islam. With that, as with the earlier generations, we will find success only there. So I conclude calling all of you to reassess our current situation and to commit ourselves sincerely to Islam, to make a change in the way things have been going to this point, to have an impact on the society, to contribute to this country, part of God's world. Let us commit ourselves, recommit ourselves to practicing Islam and to building the necessary institutions to promote Islam.
If you have a second question, you will need to go to the rear of the line before answering that second question. If you write down your question, the question will have a second priority. It is better that you get to the microphone or have someone else go to the microphone for you to ask that question. Non-Muslims who are with us this evening, I'm not going to call you out, but I want you to know that this forum, inshallah, is an excellent opportunity for you to give us some feedback and to clarify any misconceptions you have on any subject in Islam. We make a priority for you at the microphones, so if there are any non-Muslims here in the audience tonight, contact any volunteer that you see in the aisles, and they will assist you in getting to the front of the line to ask your questions. Your questions need not be limited to this topic, but I ask that they do be brief, and if you simply want to make a comment or a criticism, you may also do that. Do not fear anyone's anger for something that you might say. You are welcome in this audience to say anything that you need to say, but I ask you to please keep it brief. With no further ado, inshallah, keeping this very short, I now bring Dr. Bilal Phillips back to the microphone, inshallah, for question and answers. I remind everyone that the salat will be immediately following this question and answer session. Salat al-Isha will be immediately following this question and answer session. The gentleman in the front will begin with a question from you, will then go to the rear mic, and I believe we'll be taking two questions at a time from the sister section. Brother, could you please state your name and occupation?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
State your name and question with your announcement.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Bilal Muhammad Amin. I am a businessman. My question is, in modern Islam, people are accepting women as the leader. What is my question to Mr. Philip is whether we approve lady as our ruler from the Islamic point of view.
What is the opinion of... Okay, inshallah, I ask that the microphone technicians try to keep both mics open on stage at all times. Do not close either of the stage mics. The question is, what is your opinion on what is Muslim, what is in Islam, and Muslim women as rulers?
Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in a hadith found in Sahih al-Bukhari, when it was mentioned to him that a woman had become the queen of Persia, had become the ruler of Persia, he said, a people who choose as their leader a woman will not succeed. So, the position held in Islam is that ultimate leadership. It doesn't mean a woman can't be the head of a school, head of a hospital, other institutions, but as the head of states, the ultimate leader of the country, Islam recommends that that position be held by a man. That is the strong recommendation. The Prophet ﷺ did not forbid it. He did not forbid that a woman lead. He didn't forbid it. But he advised against it, that it would lead to the failure of the society. And it does represent importance on the part of the society. And that is why places like the US, which is one of the strongest nations, they have no female presidents. All of the presidents since its beginning, they had none. Britain had none until more recently, as it became weaker, lost its power. Then you saw female rulers appearing more often. Similarly, France and the other big countries of the West, it was not a common phenomenon.
Thank you for your question, inshallah. We'll take a question from the rear section. Brother's mic, inshallah. Could you please state your name and occupation?
Assalamu alaikum. This is Salahuddin Ayyubi. I am a software engineer by profession. My question is with regard to ijtihad. There are some scholars who say that ijtihad leads to modernism or bid'ah and innovation. And there are some others who say that if you consider the sunnah, it is agreed upon that ijtihad is permitted in Islam. So what's your position with regard to ijtihad in Islamic sense? And I just want to add with regard...
Don't add. Let me just answer your question. With regards to ijtihad, modernists may use the call to ijtihad as a door for them to change the religion. Ijtihad meaning making new rulings for new circumstances, right? Islam in general left the door for ijtihad open, but that is ijtihad of the scholars. Not any person, any lay person, anybody without scholarship making ijtihad. Not in terms of the rules of Islam, making judgments, making laws. No, that is left to scholars. Those who closed the door of ijtihad did so in ignorance, and that led to stagnation. Historically, it is well known. From the 13th century, with the fall of Baghdad, the door for ijtihad was closed by the scholars of that time, and they promoted the blind following of the madhabs, because that's where you end up. If there's no ijtihad, then you just have madhabs. You forgot to follow one of them, and that led to what it led to in terms of corruption. So much so that it was ruled that it was not permissible for a Hanafi to marry a Shafi'i. That is with the closing of the door of ijtihad. This is the corruption that came out of it, and so on and so forth. So the basic position is that the door of ijtihad is open for the scholars, not for people without qualification. It's like the door for brain operations. It's open for every brain surgeon, but not for any doctor who feels like checking it out. Same basic principle.
To the sisters, thank you for the question. Inshallah, sisters, you have a question? Could you please state your name and occupation and briefly state your question?
Yeah, I'm Yasmin Zulekha. I'm a doctor. It's the same knowledge that you have serving yourself for answers about whom you are supposed to marry, whom you are not supposed to marry. And science talks that on famous marriages. What is Islamic view on this?
This question is off the topic. Do we have a question on the topic of modernism in Islam?
I think this is a question related because it is a scientific challenge to Islam which calls for a reassessment. What they're basically talking about is marrying cousins, right? That it is commonly said that frequent marriage of cousins leads to defects, birth defects and these kinds of things, right? Where children are born with cleft lips and a variety of different birth defects as a result of continual marriage of cousins. But reality is that marriage of cousins in and of itself has not been proven scientifically to cause this. Medical studies have not established this. This is an assumption which has been made in the medical profession. It's become well known, commonly circulated, but it has not been established scientifically. It is, you could say, an opinion held which has become commonly accepted. But fact of the matter, from my readings, this has not been scientifically established. But in any case, even if it is, we're talking about continual marriages. especially in societies like in where you have certain segments of the society, like amongst the ruling families in Europe, where everybody married amongst themselves, and it was a very small and limited group, that you started to see these kinds of birth defects appearing, or it was said to be caused by this. In any case, Islam does not teach a preference for marrying cousins. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam married 12 women. Only one out of the 12 was a cousin. Only one out of the 12 was a cousin. So Islam does not recommend marriage to cousins. It permits it. The example of the Prophet ﷺ is to marry outside of the group, outside of the family, within other families, from other societies. Sophia was from a Jewish extraction. Maria was from an Egyptian extraction, and so on and so forth. He married women from a variety of different backgrounds outside of his family structure. And that is what Islam recommends. That is preferable.
Thank you, inshallah. We'll take another question from the sister section. We have another question from the sister section. Okay, we're going to the front of the men's section, inshallah. Brother, could you please state your name and your occupation and briefly state your question?
My name is Mohammed. I am from Madras. Sir, for your wonderful speech, we are very grateful to you. But you have not touched the economic section, economic aspects of modern Muslims. We are in India living in a non-Islamic state. The concept of interest, without interest nobody is giving the money. What is the solution for it?
Okay, I did mention riba and interest, that the modernists have proposed that this is permissible. What is the solution for it? Well, the solution was started back in the 70s when the first Islamic bank was set up. When the idea of Islamic banking was floated, the Western economic and banking institutions laughed and they scoffed at it. They said, what a joke. Banking without interest? Who ever heard of that? Not realizing that interest banking was something which happened only a few hundred years before. Prior to that, people's economic dealings in Europe was without interest because it was known interest was evil. When Muslims started this, it took off. So much so that today all of your leading banks, HSBC, Citibank, Bank of London, all of your major banks around the world have branches for Islamic banking. That is the answer. The solution, the alternative. What I say here is that with nearly 200 million Muslims here in India, the fact that they do not have Islamic banks where Muslims can put their money, have it invested without interest, I will say that is an indictment of the Muslims of India. That is their failure. Their failure to establish alternatives when they have millionaires and billionaires in their midst, but they're using the money in a way which is not pleasing to Allah. They're only taking out of it for their own pleasure, their own self-aggrandizement, rather than seeing in the blessing which Allah has given them a responsibility to help the rest of the Muslim community find alternatives for Islam, for economics. Islamic alternatives for economic dealings in this country. It is their duty. And they, each and every one who is in a position to establish an Islamic alternative and does not do so, they carry the sin of the community forced to deal in interest. Not to say that each and every individual who ends up dealing in interest gets off the hook, that they are excused. No, they still have to answer to Allah. Because in the end, dealing in interest is a choice. In most cases, 99.9% of the cases, people choose to deal in interest.
Thank you for that question, inshallah. I'm still looking for some more Muslims. Okay, then, inshallah, we're coming to the back mic, inshallah. Brother, please state your name and occupation.
My name is Deepak. I work as a sales executive. My question is not related to modernization. It's like, in among Muslims, why there are differences? Tamil speaking Muslims, Hindi speaking Muslims, Malayalam speaking Muslims, and why people among themselves there are divisions like Rauta, Marakir, and they don't marry among they don't marry Urdu speaking Muslims, Tamil speaking Muslims. Why is it so?
Okay, first question, why are there Muslims speaking different languages? Because Islam is a religion of the whole world. That's why you find Muslims speaking all of your major languages of the world. You have Muslims speaking Malay in Indonesia and Malaysia, Muslims speaking Filipino in Philippines, Muslims speaking Chinese, Mongolian in China, in Russia. Wherever you go in the world, you have Muslims speaking the language of the area in which they exist. Okay, so that's why we have Muslims speaking all the different languages, rather than all Muslims speaking one language. Now, there is one universal language which Muslims share, and that is Arabic. And that's why they're able to pray with each other wherever they are in the world. Arabic is the bonding language which links them so they can pray together in congregation anywhere in the world. With regards to what you perceive as communities among Muslims not marrying each other, this is from their deviation from the teachings of Islam. Islam doesn't teach that. Islam is against that. But this is their ignorance. This is their own habits which they have given precedence to, their customs over Islamic teachings. Because otherwise, Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, had said that if a person comes to ask for your daughter in marriage, and you are pleased with his religion and his character, then you should marry your daughter to him, regardless of his background. Otherwise, there will be corruption in the land. So Islam really speaks very strongly against this practice that you're speaking of. And in other communities, we don't find as much as you may find here in India. It is less. This may vary from place to place. But Islamic teachings, according to the teachings of Islam, the early generations, if you look at the history of Muslims in different parts of the world, in Spain, in India, and elsewhere, they married freely amongst each other and didn't restrict their marriages to small family groups, giving them names like Sayyids and things like this. It wasn't a practice. This is a deviation from Islamic teachings that you're observing. Okay?
Do you have another question?
Little brother, some questions have come from the system.
Do you have another question?
Same, but I have found that people still doing that thing. They are not saying.
The other questions? People are people. Yeah, people. Okay. Sister, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we give the non-Muslims preference, inshallah, for all the misconceptions are clear. Go ahead with your question.
Well, there is some questions that come to you, brother, and the sisters want that to explanation for the questions which have already come to you.
No questions have come to us.
Here are some questions. Interest is haram.
One question, just make one question.
Okay. Interest is haram, but I would like to know whether share dividend is permitted or not.
Is this in your topic, or is this this is a quick question? It should be held, inshallah, for after. I ask that the Muslims keep their questions brief and on this topic, inshallah. And do you have a question on this topic?
Is cloning halal or haram? And they would like to know with the explanation of the verses.
Should Dr. Bilal, do you think that's on the topic? Not really. It's not really on the topic. But generally speaking, in relationship to the issue of what is it called? Share is what? Share. Huh?
Cloning. No, cloning.
Now she's asking about cloning. Well, I was going to answer the first question first, but anyway, whatever. Cloning, where it involves human beings, cloning would be unacceptable. Where it involves human beings. Cloning in the animal kingdom and in the vegetable kingdom for the benefit of human beings is acceptable. If we clone a particular strain of rice or wheat or whatever because it is strong and it's able to withstand disease and things like this, there is no harm. This is knowledge which Allah has given us. If we do it in the animal kingdom, like cloning a cow that has been genetically modified to produce insulin in its milk. Insulin, which normally is a very difficult process to gain, it is possible to put, a gene into a cow so that the cow will, the next generation of cows will give insulin in their milk. So then such a cow you want to clone to increase the number, because if the next generation will be lost again, you clone to produce this for the benefit of human society. This is permissible. But when it comes to the cloning of human beings, the intention behind it is evil. The intention behind it is evil. Because people in the plan to clone human beings either have the intent to produce spare parts for an existing human being. That's what you're going to do, right? You take a few cells from yourself and you produce another version of yourself. Why? So you can have spare parts. When your heart runs out, you can take a heart out, put it in, something else goes wrong, you take it out, you put it in. You're looking for spare parts. But what happens is that cloned human being is not you. Not any more than your child is you, who was formed from your sperm. It is your sperm that has produced that child, along with the ovum of your wife, but it's not you. And if we are able to clone a human being, it will not be you. You cannot say, well, this is my extra body that I can take my spare parts from. No. So the intent is evil. They're not looking to reproduce another you for any other intent than for you to be able to live, to become immortal. The same trick which Satan played on Adam.
So clothing from that perspective would be considered haram.
Thank you. That was the final question of the evening. His time has now run out. I thank you all for your attendance, inshallah, and your questions and answers and your patience. Subhanakallah wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh. And I remind you all that the Isha prayer will now be performed in the masjid. Sisters can come to the sisters.